Okay, let's forget the intro just for a second. Have a listen to this. So this is the standard Ableton 909 core drum kit. And then if we add this to it, this plugin just instantly gives it vibes. This is the brand new TAIP plugin from Baby Audio. They sent this across to me and I thought, well, I've probably got enough saturation plugins as it is. I've got the Volf compressor, Waves J37, Soundtoys Radiator, RC20, Spectre, Sample X2, Decimort, Trash. I have more saturation plugins than any other type of plugin. I'm an absolute sucker for one. So I thought, do I actually need another saturation plugin? Well, that was until I heard TAIP. Now, the main feature of TAIP by Baby Audio is that it uses AI to emulate tape saturation. Now, with most tape saturation plugins, they're trying to emulate old tape machines, and it's quite hard to do. There's so many different nuances, so many different parameters and things like that that really make a hardware tape machine sound how it does, and that's very hard for a plugin to replicate. You can actually see on the Baby Audio website that it says, instead of using traditional DSP, we've developed TAIP around an AI algorithm designed to decipher the invisible nuances of analog circuits. Now, what this basically means is Baby Audio have taken this AI and let it listen to a whole load of different results that have come from audio being fed through tape machines to kind of figure out all the different things that a tape machine might do to it based on a whole load of different factors. And this AI can then be used to do this within the plugin. If you want to read more about it, there's a whole load of great information on the website about how it works. But in this video, I really want to concentrate on how it sounds. So let's start with the drums, because that's where I really think this plugin shines and probably where I'm going to be using it the most. As you heard just a minute ago, I was using this on a 909 core kit within Ableton. This is as dry as it comes. And I'm going to enable this plugin and just reset it to what it would be by default. Now, I've only been playing around with this plugin for a little while, but it's definitely very playful. It feels like all the controls within here are just meant to be played with to see what you can get out of it. One of my favorite things, and probably one of the biggest controls on here, is the drive knob. This is where you start to hear that sound. Oh my God, that drive is just so dirty. The more you push it, the bigger those drums become. If you've ever wanted to get those kind of dirty, distorted kicks, this is definitely a good plugin to get that with. And if it's a bit too much, then you can actually use the mix control to actually mix in just a certain amount of that saturation. So there you go, I've got about 60% of that wet signal in there, about 40% of the dry, and you've just got that crunch coming through from that saturation, but you've still got the original drums, the impact from that kick in the background. We can also tweak the output as well. So those are the main controls within TAIP, and to be honest, you could almost just leave it there as it is, because that already sounds so great. I love that saturated sound, but there's a whole load of other controls within there to kind of tweak that as well. The first one is the noise. Now, this is quite familiar to anybody who's used any other kind of saturation plugin like RC20, for example. It adds some of that vinyl kind of tape kind of hardware noise in the background. I don't think you want too much of that in there, but that's obviously to taste. You can adjust that however you want to. Next up, we have wear, which is a bit like wobble within RC20. Again, it just makes it feel a little bit more unpredictable. And actually you can hear flanging with that. You can see it says TAIP flanging on here. If I do the mix all the way up to 100%, you'll hear what the wear does on its own. But if I decrease the mix, then obviously you're getting a mixture between that wobbly kind of drums and then the original dry signal, which is why you're kind of getting that flanging effect, which can be really cool. To be honest, I'd put an EQ8 on here and just scoop out that bottom end. And then for the breakdowns, for example, you could have that flanging effect happening on the drums. That could be a really interesting effect in the breakdown. Next up, we have the glue control, which much like a glue compressor helps glue everything together, which is something I've always done with saturation anyway. By putting a bit of saturation on the drums, for example, it just helps glue them all together because they're all being treated exactly the same. And this glue control allows you to decide how much of it you want. It's not that easy to hear with this much drive. I might take the drive down just for a second and see what it's like without that. Next up, you've got two different settings for input. You've got normal and hot. Hot basically is overdriving it into the saturator, which gives you a more distorted kind of sound. That really does sound kind of cool on hot. Next up, you have the model setting. Now this is really interesting because you have the options of single and dual. So single is just the usual way of using this plugin. However, if you set it as dual, it's actually two different emulations being chained together under the hood. So you can think of this plugin twice. So if you had this plugin on there twice, that's basically what it's doing. It's kind of chaining it all together with 50% drive coming from each. It definitely sounds dirtier and more kind of lo-fi because it's being kind of processed twice. You're getting twice that degradation. Next up, you have the presence control. Now, when you use tape saturation, it kind of takes away some of that brightness from the top end. And by using this presence control, you can add some of that brightness back in again. So where you might have used an EQ before just to add some more tops back into it again, you've got that wonderful control within there that does that for you. And then finally, you have the high shape and low shape settings within here. This allows you to decide how much saturation is applied to the high end and to the low end. Now, I haven't quite figured out what exactly is going on within here, but you can definitely hear the results. And that's really it as far as settings goes within this plugin. You've got a few up the top as well, allowing you to reset the plugin. You're able to save a preset, load a preset, and you've also got different colors as well, so you can decide if you want it on a different color. Personally, I like the black setting. I think it looks really cool. And that's really it as far as the settings goes. It's quite a simple plugin to use, and it's all about playing around with it and seeing what you can get out of it, because every different sound that you feed into it will need different settings, and you can kind of play around with them to see and get the best result out of it that you want to. For example, I've got these keys. Now those sound quite clean, but I can apply tape to it to make it a little bit grittier, a little bit more saturated. You can hear there that I'm actually using that wear setting just to make it wobble a little bit. If I take that down, you'll hear the difference. Just makes it wobble nicely, just like a bit of vintage hardware would do. And I can actually mix it in and create that kind of phasing effect as well. So it's almost like a chorus, and I've actually already got a chorus on here. If I take that off and take the mix all the way down, this is what it sounds like statically without any chorus on it at all. So you're getting that wonderful flanging chorusy kind of effect. That's another great use of tape. Now, as I mentioned, tape really shines when you start using it on drums, and I've already used it on a couple of tracks already. But one thing I did notice was when I was using it on a kick. For example, I've got this kick within here, which sounds a little bit like this. It's quite a standard 909 kind of kick, and I wanted to give it a bit of crunch, so I put some tape on it. Now that's 100% wet, but we're losing some of that kick in there, some of that weight of that kick in there. So I'm going to mix a little bit of it in, just a little bit of that kind of saturated sound in. So at around 50%, I'm kind of getting that sound that I want to. I'm getting that kind of saturated kind of sound, but I'm still losing that bottom end. I really want that low end in there still. So what I ended up doing was actually not using tape on its own like that. I actually used it set up as a audio effect rack. So I've actually got two different chains here. I've got the saturation, which is the tape, and then I've got a bit of EQ in there, and then I've got the dry signal as well. So basically what I wanted to do is take that kick and split it out. So I've got the original kick within there coming through dry, but then just that saturated kick coming through just as the top end. So that's that saturation channel within there, the chain within there. I've got tape set up within here. I've got it on 100% wet. So I've just got the saturation coming out of that. And then what I've done is I've taken out the bottom end of that saturated channel and a little bit at the top as well, and then fed it back in again. So I've actually kind of got the dry kick with a saturated kick over the top of it. So you can hear the dry kick and then the saturated kick. And together. So it gives me that kind of saturated kick that I was looking for, but still keeps that low end energy. Now there is obviously the control in here to affect the low shape within the plugin. However, I noticed that if I wanted more of that bass within there, that kind of that low end coming back in again, it wasn't distorting on that kick. I wanted the distortion that was coming from the whole signal of that kick. So the real low end, because that's where that kind of distortion, that drive was really kind of coming from, that sound was coming from. But I also wanted the weight of that kick as well, that subbiness as well. So this was the only way I could figure out of doing it around that. Hopefully there might be another way of doing that. Hopefully maybe another control within tape at some point in the future to maybe feed some of that original low end through, maybe, so he's still got that thickness as well. But for now, that kind of chain worked out for me. And from what I've been playing around with it so far, I really love this plugin. I think it works really nicely. So I want to say a big thank you to Baby Audio for sending it over to me. I've already used it in a few tracks on the drums within those tracks, and it works really, really well. I'm sure I could probably get a very similar kind of effect with maybe one of the other plugins that I've got, or maybe a combination. But to be honest, tape just gave me that result that I was looking for very, very quickly. And I think because of the interface and the controls within it, it's very playful and it allows you to kind of get in there and start playing around with different sounds. And yeah, it just kind of worked for me and I really like it. So yeah, I definitely recommend giving it a try, seeing what you think to it. It's actually on offer at the moment, introductory price, the discount on there. I'll put a link in the description below if you want to try that out. And of course there is a trial, so you can always give it a go and see what you think.